Hi everyone, this is Jewish Talk coming to you from Nassau Community College on 90.3 WHPC, also streaming on nccradio.org. Tell everybody out there who may not know about our program that even if they don't have a radio, they can go online at nccradio.org. This program is later archived on Spreaker.com. This program is repeated, guess what, on Sunday evening at 11 p.m. So hi there, my name is Rabbi Perl. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and happy Passover. And of course, this all depends on when you're listening or watching. Oy gewalt, I nearly forgot. You can see us right now. I'm waving on Facebook Live at WHPC or at my own page at facebook.com, Anshel Perl. So hello on the radio, hello online, hello to the world. And of course, as you understand and well know, that these are the intermediate days of the first 2 days of Passover and the concluding days this coming week, which we will be discussing in a moment. But you know, I still have some leftovers from the Seder. And I want to say good morning to Jeffrey Hirsch. Thank you so much. Put up your comments, put up your questions, and we'll have a chance to address them. You know, as I celebrated, I'm sure you all had wonderful, meaningful, and uplifting Seders, I learned something interesting, that the 10 plagues can teach us about dealing with difficult people. So good morning to Karen Dumbeck. Unbelievable. So here we go. As I was reading and learning about the 10 plagues, I thought perhaps that these plagues can actually teach us some lessons for dealing with people or situations that we may find difficult or oppressive. So here's what I came up with. We all know the first one was blood. For the first plague, God instructed Moses to tell Aaron to take his staff and extend his hand over the Egyptian waters, which will become blood. Interestingly, God commanded Aaron and not Moses to strike the Nile River. Rashi explains that God wanted to teach Moses gratitude towards the Nile River, which had protected him as an infant when his mother placed him in a basket in the water to hide him from Pharaoh's decree to kill all the Jewish male newborns. See, if God did not want Moses to show ingratitude to an inanimate river, how much more must we remember to remain focused and grateful for every kindness shown to us throughout our lives, even from those we may find difficult. Thank you so much. I want to welcome as well Jean Brandonston, and my condolences to the family. The second of the plagues was frogs. When one monstrous frog arose from the Nile, the Egyptians brought weapons to hit and get rid of it. Instead of sustaining injuries or falling dead, however, the more it was hit, the more baby frogs it would spit out. As more and more frogs swarmed out of the large frog, the Egyptians grew angry and lost control of themselves, despite the increasing damage they were causing. Expressing anger not only hurts others, but destroys the person who is expressing anger. When anger briefly flares, instead of opening one's mouth or taking action, if instead we could just pause for a minute or two and breathe, the whole incident might fade away like a passing cloud. Welcome to Patty Fuchs. Hope your Passover is going well. We're discussing how the 10 plagues can teach us a lot about not to be angry or how to overcome anger or angry people around us. We're up to lice. This was the first plague that the Egyptian magicians could not replicate, which forced them to acknowledge that the plague was initiated by the finger of God. God orchestrates the world and puts every difficult person we encounter in our paths. Instead of despairing or feeling attacked or triggered, we should remember that God chose for us to have these interactions, to learn how best handle them, with dignity, with grace, and with courtesy. Let's take a look at wild animals. The plague of wild animals, what could it teach us in terms of anger control? What was this plague? This plague consisted of a wild mixture of animals, snakes, and scorpions. The divinely imposed mixture of wild beasts could have led the Jewish people to believe that God was in favor of mixtures. But at the same time, he also set apart in the land of Goshen where his people were. What does this mean? The mixture of wild animals can teach us that even when we set out into the wider world of mixed values and blurred boundaries, we should never conclude that God favors mixing with ideas, ideologies, and isms that are foreign to us. God wants us and our values to remain distinct from the rest of humankind. So, welcome now to Linda Zellickson. Fantastic. Cattle disease. While the Torah tells us that all the livestock of the Egyptians passed away, died, Rashi explains that only the Egyptian cattle left outside in the field were killed. The Egyptians could have averted the damage simply by bringing their animals inside. Hasidism teaches that we have two souls, one animal and one godly. Throughout the day, and especially in difficult situations, we must remember to bring in our animal souls, which react strongly. For instance, when we feel attacked, or fight or flight instincts may influence us to express ourselves in unpleasant and combative ways that escalate and worsen conflicts. So instead of letting our inner animal out to go wild, we can slow down, pause, and show restraint. Let's move on now to boils. Welcome, boils. We're discussing the 10 plagues and how can they teach us attributes of more kindness and control. Boils. Well, Moses put the plague of boils into motion by taking a fistful of soot from an extinguished furnace that he thrust heavenward so high that the ashes reached God's throne of glory before falling back down onto every person and beasts in Egypt to create boils. That's how the commentaries explain. The fact that a small amount of soot managed to spread throughout the land of Egypt was miraculous. When trying to accomplish anything or dealing with a frustrating person or situation, put forth your best effort, but then throw it heavenward, and God will do the rest. Hail. Hail came down as a flash of ice and fire. When we feel attacked, we may feel tempted to provide an icy reply. Instead of giving in to destructive instincts that will surely worsen and escalate tense exchanges, let's try to connect with our inner warmth, put that iciness, but with warmth and understanding, and choose to communicate with courtesy, with kindness, and with love. On the other hand, there are also times that we need to temper our urgent and heated, passionate responses with an ice of coldness by stopping and coolly considering our response. So take it easy, as we would say. Balance everything. Too hot, cool down. Too cold, warm it up. Locust. Locust in Hebrew is called arbe, which means destruction, but the letters are similar to harbe, which means abundance or bounty. When looking at our lives, do we focus on the negative instead of the positive? Do we focus on our challenges or our difficulties? From arbe, we can choose to see the good and adjust our attitudes to reframe and see the abundance and bounty. And in fact, as we were studying over the last few days, 3 days of the holiday, the first 2 days of Pesach and Shabbos, that the entire aspect of Passover and reading of the Haggadah and all these celebrations boils down to giving praise and showing gratitude to Hashem for the many miracles of what Passover represents, and on a daily basis to remember, to appreciate, to have an attitude of gratitude. What about darkness? What can we learn from darkness? As we say hello to Holly Feynman Lepinel. Oh my goodness, I met Holly. I met Holly before Pesach. It's fantastic when I'm able to meet the wonderful people listen. So big shout out to you, Holly. No man, darkness. What was the darkness? No man could see his brother, nor could anyone rise from his place for a 3-day period. But there was light in our dwellings. Nachmanides explains that the darkness for the Egyptians was not just an absence of light, but an opaque fog that extinguished all flames, so that the Egyptians could not even use lamps. Yet the light in our homes remained on. What can this teach us? When we feel in the dark or confused about how to handle a difficult situation, we really all can turn. We all have the light of the Torah that's available to us to illuminate and clarify our next course of action. Let's see now. The importance of knowing that is so important to us. Let's now speak now to the last of the plagues. The last of the plagues was the slaying of the firstborn. Let me just say hello now to everybody who's watching us here. Okay, beautiful. So what can we learn from the slaying of the firstborn? As we all know, went out there, and the firstborn, we're now discussing the 10 plagues. The deaths of so many animals and so many people, from Pharaoh's firstborn to the firstborn of the maidservant, happened at the same time. But there was protection that we were given. Hashem, the Almighty God, protects and loves and cherishes far above and beyond our imaginations. God is near to every single one of us. And extending, so the last of the plagues shows Hashem watching, nurturing, His comforting presence is there, it's supporting and supervision. So as we remember the plagues, we remember that God created nature, of which He can always rise to create unexpected miracles in our lives. Whenever we feel in need of help or extra reserves of strength, we can turn to Hashem for assistance. While we continue to make our efforts to turn ourselves into vessels to receive God's blessings, at the same time, we can pause, stand back, and know that the Almighty God can work outside of nature to give us what we need, never to be afraid. Let me welcome now Mr. Fred, Dumba Fred. It's evening time, but is joining us all the way from Uganda, Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, feel honored that we have a listening audience all the way in Uganda, in Africa. I'm now going to share with you an amazing story. Jeannie Marie, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to share with you an amazing story that has changed the way I look at a matzah. We all know that the hand-baked matzah are put into ovens. That's one of as opposed to the square matzahs, the machine-baked, the actual process with the hand-baked shmura matzah is going through an oven. And I'm going to share with you a story. Hold on to your chairs as I share this with you. First of all, appreciate that each of the 3 matzahs that we set on the Seder table is named for one of the 3 segments of the Jewish people. The uppermost matzah, right, we have 3, we stack them up, and they correspond to the 3 groupings. The uppermost one is personalized as the Kohen, the priest. The middle matzah is the Levi, And the bottom matzah is Yisrael. Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. At no time throughout the year do we put a human face, so to speak, on our food. So why here? Why do we symbolize and say that the three matzahs that we eat on the night of the Seder corresponds to three groupings: the Kohen, the Levi, and the Yisrael? In the final Mishnah of the Talmud, it states that the greatest vessel that we can create is that of peace. The Hebrew word for vessel is keli, or kli, and that those letters, chaf, lamed, yud, they actually spell these very three words. Chaf is Kohen, lamed is Levi, and Yisrael. So if you put together the acrostics, or the abbreviation of these three groupings, you have the word keli, a vessel. So when all of us, no matter our level of prominence or accomplishment, when we come together as one in peace, this is the greatest blessing of all. When a community or a country or leadership are united, you only have blessings. Perhaps on the night of Passover, when we left Egypt as a unified nation, these three matzahs held together as one symbolization of unity. And that's always something that we can always strive for. So amongst the many lessons and inspirations of the Seder, which really is built around family being together, around friends being together, is all about unity. And when a person's unified, when people live in a unified way, so many beautiful things happen. So we want to say good morning to Jonathan Wolf, who is a leader in his own right. Is an amazing leader and was a great leader in the Oceanside community for many years, and now continues to enjoy with his grandchildren, Baruch Hashem. So welcome, Jonathan Wolf. So here's the story I wanted to share with you. I introduced the idea that the three matzahs represent three different groupings, but all together, unified. As I gaze at the matzahs, I'm reminded of one of the most poignant stories I've ever heard in my life. For 10 years, Rabbi Yonason Shippel, he was the rabbi of an organization in Upper Manhattan. He went for 10 years to New Square, that's in Rockland County. He would go with his sons, Sruli and Tzvi. What would he do there? He would go to bake matzahs on Erev Pesach. Now, all of us go and buy our matzahs, days or weeks before. But there's a special mitzvah, and there are those who are very careful. They want to eat matzah at the Seder with matzah that's baked that very day. So in those hand-baking matzah bakeries, in the afternoon, there are groupings, small groupings, obviously. Not everybody can do this. Groupings go, and they actually bake their own matzah in the late afternoon in preparation for the Seder. Not only do they get you could say, really fresh matzahs, but also that's actually how it was biblically when there was the commandment to bring and have the Seder, and in the biblical times, the matzah was made that afternoon in preparation for the Seder itself. So this rabbi with his children would go to New Square in Rockland County and join the square Rebbe with hundreds of his followers, and they would do this. It's a very extremely festive occasion. The Hasidim wear their shtreimels, their Sabbath clothing, and they recite the Hallel after the baking is done, and they sing and they dance. It's a great, great event. It's a lot of work. The Rebbe himself, as the leader, he would pour the water that was used. It's called Maim Shalonu. That water that had been left guarded overnight. He would pour it into a bowl of water, and the rapid process of making matzahs begins. Obviously includes the kneading of the dough, dividing into chunks. It's called teglach. Then we distribute the chunks to those who flatten and roll them. They perforate it with this flattened dough so the matzah will bake well and not swell. So lifting then you take the finished product, these flattened patties, so to speak. They put them onto long wooden poles, and then they're brought over to the oven, where in 25 seconds they become well-baked matzah. Obviously, you're aware that matzah has to be stopped from fermenting within 18 minutes. But in real life, the actual making of a matzah, from the time it's kneaded, rolled out, and holed, and in and out of the oven, it's less than 5 minutes. The actual baking of those hand-baked matzahs that you had is they're ready to go in 25 seconds. So over the years, various people are assigned for the different jobs that we mentioned. However, there's one job, that of the shibba in Yiddish. This is the person who skillfully puts the patties into the oven and removes them just in time. And that belonged exclusively to an individual. His name was Rabbi Shaya Ungar. He passed away in the year 2015. He was the revered attendant of the two square Rebbes at that time. And this is the hardest job. You're taking those matzahs on the rolls and putting them in and making sure they bake quickly and don't get burnt. It requires strength, skill, and precision. If you leave the matzah in the oven for another few seconds, it becomes black and burnt and inedible. If you remove it too fast, the particles of flour have not been baked and might become chametz. So, as this Rabbi Shaya, who had this job, aged, he became too weak to be the shibba, and was instead given the responsibility of inspecting the finished matzahs to ensure they were baked properly and fit for consumption on Pesach. Rabbi Shaya would inspect each matzah and rule on its kashrus. If it was kafula, which means if it was matzah that with folds, it wouldn't be used. If it was nefucha, if it swelled and bubbled, or if it was soft and not thoroughly baked, he would rule it invalid. His decision was ironclad. Reb Shaya would stand for hours near the hot oven and, like a dutiful soldier, do his job with love and commitment. Year after year, Reb Shaya was there, checking and ruling on every single matzah. The saintly man seemed angelic as he went about his holy toil. As he grew older and weaker, people tried to convince him to give the job to others, but he steadfastly refused. One year, Reb Shippel said softly, Reb Shaya, "You've done your job nobly for so many years. Perhaps it's time to let the younger generation take over, even for a little while, so you can rest." Reb Shaya bent towards Reb Shippel and whispered softly but urgently, and he said the following, I can't leave my post. I can't leave my post." "Why not?" asked Rabbi Shippel. And he went on to say, "Remember what I once told you late one night when we traveled on a bus together in the Ukraine years ago." And then Reb Shippel remembered. It was late one night, and many were asleep on the bus as it drove through the quiet back roads of Ukraine. And Reb Shippel said to this Reb Shaya, "Tell me about your past." He was sitting next to him. "I know you went through the war." Reb Shaya sighed and he began. "I had a terrible job in Auschwitz, the most horrific job in the death camp." And with a heavy heart, he recalled those days of torment and anguish. And he went on to say, after people were gassed to death, they were placed on a long flatbed wagon. As many as 60 or 70 bodies at a time were stacked close to each other. I had to go along with those bodies, and sometimes in the freezing nights, and place them into the crematorium where they were burnt. Shai, this individual, is telling the story, was from the famous Sonderkommandos. In German, Sonderkommando means the special unit. They were composed of prisoners, mostly Jews, who were forced, on the threat of their own deaths, to aid with the disposal of gas chamber victims during the Holocaust. Since these Jews saw the atrocities of the Nazis at first hand, the SS would murder them every few months and get new ones. They also slept away from the other prisoners so they could not report what they had seen. They were also fed better so they would have energy to carry the corpses. I feel horrific guilt about this to this day, Reb Shai said sadly. But if I had not done it, I would have been killed on the spot. So I was one of those charged by the SS with the job of taking the holy bodies of the Jewish people, including some of my own relatives and friends, and placing them in the crematorium, where they were consumed by flames and reduced to ashes. How can I ever repair what I have done? Sure, I was forced, he said. If I would not do it, someone else would, and I would be killed. But still. So let me tell you what I do to repair for my actions. Now standing near the hot oven during a pause in the baking, Reb Shai paused and said, I don't see matzahs coming out of the oven. I see faces. Every matzah to me is another Jew. As I gaze at each matzah emerging from the furnace, I do not see plain unleavened bread. I gaze at the matzah and I see Yankala. I look at the next matzah. I hold it with awe and I see Sorala. I look at another matzah and I see my father, my mother, my brother, my sister, my nephew, my niece. Each matzah tells another story. Its individual features captures another face of a Jew who is now being taken out of the flames. I know that each of these matzahs will be eaten during the Seder by breathing, living, vibrant, happy Jews, celebrating their freedom and their redemption. This is my tikkun. This is my way of repairing my past. I put Jews into the fire, and now I see them coming out of the fire and being brought into Jewish homes and communities. I will stay at this job as long as humanly possible. Rabbi Shippel couldn't speak. He was startled. His mouth was parched dry from the heat of the fire nearby and from the raw intensity of Reb Shai's heart. Now you understand why it is only that matzah that got the name of our people, the Kohen, the Levi, and the Israel. Did our sages perhaps have an intuition that Reb Shai would need to be able to ascribe names to matzahs to ease him from the unbearable guilt and shame that plagued him at the core of his soul? And my friend, this is a story that I shared in shul. It was heartrending. I want to say good morning, Moadim Besimcha, to Levana, Cohen, Lichter, and to everybody joining us on the radio and on Facebook. I'm waving right to left, left to right. So, dear friends, I have a confession to make. The confession is that Passover isn't over. It ain't over till it's over. And it's one of those best-kept secrets. There's more to Passover than 2 nights of Seder. There's actually, I'm speaking to you during the Chol HaMoed, the intermediate weekday part of the holiday, and it'll conclude the last 2 days of the holiday is all day Wednesday and all day Thursday of this week. So let's talk about what are the last 2 days of the holiday all about. You know, we all know what the first 2 days, we came out of Egypt and we sit down in the Seder. So how and why and what do we do to celebrate on the last 2 days of Passover? It's the 7th and 8th day of Passover are celebrated as a holiday, as a Yom Tov. This actually caps a week-long celebration that begins with the first Seder. In Israel, only the 7th day is celebrated. In Hebrew, the last 2 days are known as Shavi Shel Pesach and Achron Shel Pesach, the seventh day of Passover and the last day of Passover, respectively. Now, make sure to remember that just like we bring it Shabbos and any holiday, on Wednesday, on Tuesday evening into Wednesday, and then again late on Wednesday night, we also light the holiday candles. So, the final days of Passover 2023 begins before sunset on April the 11th and ends after nightfall on April the 13th. Candles are lit from a pre-existing flame, of course, on the evening of Wednesday evening into Thursday. So what exactly happened on the seventh day of Passover? What happened on the eighth day? Why is this celebration a whole week? Well, on the 15th day of the month of Nisan, that's when the children of Israel left Egypt, where they had been serving as slaves for generations. And despite his original stubborn refusal, after 10 debilitating plagues, Pharaoh relented and allowed the Jewish people to leave Egypt for a 3-day spiritual retreat in the desert. 3 days later, when the Israelites failed to return, Pharaoh realized that they were gone for good, safely on their way to independence and to the freedom of the Promised Land. So he bridled his best war horses and called his nation to join him in the pursuit of these erstwhile slaves. After a short chase, the Egyptian army caught up with the Israelites at the banks of the Sea of Reeds, also known as the Red Sea. The Israelites were trapped. There was nowhere to go but into the sea. Then God commanded Moses to raise his staff, and the sea split, allowing the Israelites to comfortably cross on the dry land. I'm sure everybody listening and watching has watched the Ten Commandments. I read the book, and this is what happened. When the Egyptians attempted to follow the Israelites across, the sea came crashing down on them. Chariots, riders, horses, all perished in the churning sea. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Moses led the Israelites in singing the song of the sea. The women led the women in additional songs of thanks, accompanied by tambourines and drums. This miracle took place on the wee hours of the morning of the seventh day of Passover. So this coming Wednesday is the seventh day of Passover, where we celebrate. It's a Jewish holiday. This is the day commemorating the successful crossing through the Sea of Reeds. Welcome to everybody joining us. Now, how do we celebrate the final days of Passover? Again, the seventh and eighth day are full holidays. Like other holidays, we refrain from work, other than certain acts connected to food preparation. There's holiday prayers. People come to the synagogue. The women and girls light the candles on the eve of both days. But there are some special practices for this last day that I'd like to share with you. For example, going back to the seventh day, that would be this coming Tuesday night. Many people have the custom to remain awake the entire night preceding the seventh day of Passover, and to study as a way of thanking God for the miracle that he did at that time, crossing over the Yam Suf. During the morning services of the seventh day, we have our services at 10 a.m. The Torah is read. It includes the biblical narrative, again, of the miraculous salvation at the sea and the song that we sang. Let's turn now to the eighth day of Passover, which would be this coming Wednesday evening into all day Thursday. That's called in Hebrew Achron Shel Pesach, the last day of Pesach. Allow me to recognize that we want to say our best wishes to Holly Feynman, as she has yahrzeit, and we're going to discuss momently about the importance of Yiska that is said on the eighth day of Passover. Many people have the custom to make sure that the matzah does not come in contact with moisture, lest some leftover flour becomes leavened. But on the eighth day of Passover, this restriction is relaxed. So even those who are careful with gebroks all week, comes the 8th day, it's everybody really enjoys it. And this restriction is relaxed, and the matzah can be mixed with water, with other liquids, with wine, to create Passover favorites like Kim's most important thing that she knows of Passover is matzah balls and matzah brai. Okay, so then of course there's Yiska. Yiska is the Hebrew word. During the morning service of the 8th day of this Passover, memorial prayers are recited for our departed relatives. We'll come back to that in a second. But that's something I want everyone to hear about. And perhaps this year, whatever, in the late afternoon to do this following. The Baal Shem Tov, the founding Hasidic master, remarked that on the last day of Passover, the rays of the upcoming messianic redemption are shining bright. What did he do? He instituted a special meal to be held in the waning hours of the day. And that's what we do. In the late afternoon of this coming Thursday, we sit down to a meal with matzah, and included, as introduced by Rabbi Shalom Dov Ber of Chabad, that we, during this concluding meal of the Passover holiday, to add 4 cups of wine to the meal. So in a sense, we start the holiday with the seders, with the matzah and the wine, and we mirror that seder that's held on the first nights of the holiday by this special meal. And I encourage everyone to do that. Whatever you're doing, whatever level of observance you may be, it's important on the late afternoon this Thursday coming to sit down to what is known as the Mashiach's meal. Again, a tradition introduced by the Baal Shem Tov. People all over the world sit down, don't just simply, just walk away from the holiday, but come together and to sing and share words of inspiration, have 4 cups of wine and matzah as well. Because on that day, it's very much associated with Mashiach. On the last day of Passover, the special readings in the synagogue is from the book of Isaiah. And this reading includes many of the wondrous prophecies about the era of when Mashiach comes. You know what's going to happen when Mashiach comes? No more illnesses, no more fighting on the political level, no more wars, no more attempted all kinds of terrorist attacks. There's going to be a world of peace. Hands up those who don't want that. So that's what we celebrate in a real way. We really look forward in a very urgent way, sit down to a meal dedicated to preparing ourselves for a world filled with goodness and kindness. It's called the Mashiach's meal. And it's held on the 8th day of Passover in Israel, where Passover is only 7 days. It's held on the 7th day. So in a sense, it helps us extend the holiday past nightfall, ushered out with song, with words of Torah and inspiration, and really, in a sense, brings something which is in the world of belief in a sense of reality, because it's intended to deepen our awareness of Mashiach and enable us to integrate this into our thinking process. And of course, as we all know, the 12th article of the Rambam's 13 Principles of Faith, number 12 is that Ani Mamin B'Emunah Shlema, I believe with a perfect faith in the coming of Mashiach. Even if it delays, I'm going to anticipate, I'm going to wait every day for him to come. So all the believing, in a belief sense, this is intellectual. But when we sit down, when we partake of Mashiach Suda, it reinforces that this is not just simply a belief, a principle, but it translates into an awareness, into a meal, into a physical experience, which leads us to associate this concept with our flesh and blood. It's not just something we read about in the books, right? Just imagine when you go on a nice vacation, on a cruise, you read about it, you looked it up, and you saw where the boat will go, but you can't compare that kind of experience with actually going on the boat itself. So in a certain sense, sitting down to the Mashiach meal late afternoon on this Thursday brings us front row and center in a reality. It's part of our flesh and blood, literally because of the food, etc. linking our awareness in a very physical way prepares us for this in a very, very important way. So we have so much to look forward to as we look forward to the concluding 2 days of this holiday. So let's talk about, and by the way, dear friends, that's the mission of our generation. Our generation, we are the last generation of this exile, of all these troubles that we see around the world, and also the first generation of redemption. So it's part of our mission, charging us to be aware of Mashiach and to help others and to live a life where people respect each other, care for each other, and bring only goodness and kindness to this world. Now, I mentioned before that on the second day, that's on this Thursday, we also include Yisker, the Yisker. And Yisker is the time when we remember our beloved ones. And as I mentioned, I want to thank all those, or recognize those who have yard sites for their loved ones during this week, and to make an effort to go to shul. I know that everybody, likes the Yisker on Yom Kippur, but the Yisker service is 4 times a year. First of all, I just want to bring out that this idea of the intensity and the focus as well. I just want to share the story of Rabbi Yisrael Meilau, former chief rabbi of Israel. He shares a story about a Russian immigrant who came to a court in Tel Aviv to get a certificate that confirms his Jewishness. Back in the 90s, many Soviets immigrated to Israel, and not all of them were Jewish. So these immigrants had to prove their Jewish heritage. Now, this particular Russian immigrant was 42 years old. He had moved to Israel with his wife and 2 daughters, and now at the court, he brought 2 witnesses to prove that he was indeed Jewish. The first witness stated clearly that he had been at this person's circumcision, at his bris, 42 years ago in Russia. However, the second witness was an old Lubavitcher chassid from Russia with a long white beard. And the chassid told the court the following story. I know this doctor's mother, he recalled. She was the head of a department in a hospital in Moscow. And she was a chronic smoker. And she was an avid communist. She would smoke 2 or 3 packs of cigarettes a day. But every night, she would take out 1 cigarette and put it in a special box in her bedroom. And once a year, right after Purim, she'd give me 365 cigarettes that she'd collected a whole year. And I would get her, and he would go there on the black market. He would get for her a few kilograms of flour on the black market in exchange for the cigarettes, so she could bake matzahs in a house for Passover. When Rabbi Lau heard this story, he called the doctor's mother and told this person, you know the difference between me and you? This is Rabbi Lau speaking to this person, his mother in Moscow. I keep Passover once a year, but you observe Passover 365 days of the year. Think of the story and recall the incredible perseverance of our people throughout history. Most exemplified in our faith that there are still better years ahead, as I was discussing why the conclusion of the Passover is all about focusing on the future of coming of Mashiach. So the 8th day of Passover is traditionally associated with the hopes for the coming of Mashiach. For this reason, the special Haftorah is read, and this special Mashiach meal is conducted. And I encourage everyone to put aside an hour or so, late afternoon on Thursday, and bring your friends together. And they'll say, wow, what are you talking about? Having another Seder? You say, yes, it's kind of a mirror of my Seder. The first 2 days, Seder, reflect us coming out of Egypt. And today, this concluding meal is a reflection of the future, a future out of the darkness for the whole world into the world of absolute revelation, of good health and happiness, and no more tzoros, and no more jealousy, and no more anger, all the good things. So I just want to now go forward to talking a little bit about the power of the Yiska. You see, on the last day of Pesach, when we're into focusing on the future, not only will Mashiach come for the whole world, but it'll also be the resurrection of all those who've passed on. That's the 13th principle of faith, the resurrection of everybody who's coming back. So on that last day of Passover, we have a Yiska service. We include our Seder, our Passover, our celebration, not just with ourselves, but we recognize where we've come from. We have a memory, we have our loved ones, and therefore the Yiska is such an important thing to do. Obviously, if you can't make it to the synagogue, you can say the Yiska at home as well. So when a person passes on, we must remember that we are the keepers of their story. That's why we say Kaddish, that's why we say Yiska. When a person passes and mourned, they're brought alive, so to speak, when we say the Yiska services. In a sense, it's like a rope that reaches up all the way to the heaven, where the souls grip the other end tightly, and we always remain connected. So a Yiska is a time to reach for that rope. It is our connection to them and to God, whose unbounded compassion for us can help us heal the pain as we grieve, as we remember, and as we commit to continue their values and love till the great moment of Mashiach, when we'll all be reunited. Talk about reunited, I'm so happy to know that that the Kolshevsky family have gotten all together in Connecticut. It's amazing how Passover has actually reached all the way to Connecticut. So happy Passover to Golan, Matan, Ze'ev, Leili, Boaz, Geffen, and of course, Dorothy. Give me a D, give me an O, give me an R, give me an O, give me a T, give me an H, give me a Y, and you have Dorothy. So thank you so much. So a little bit about this Yiska. What to think about and how to imagine when we remember our loved ones. And of course, as I think about this and prepare for my own, saying for my dear father and grandparents and everybody, I often think that being alive today is to continue the life of those who've passed on. And would they be happy? Would those who are sitting in Gan Eden, the holy places, would they be happy with me? Would they be happy with us and how we're conducting our life? Do we really appreciate life the way they want and the way they see life, especially where they are today? So I'm going to share with you what the Medrash tells us. I'm sure you've heard this term. Life is like kitzel over, like a passing shadow. Because we do not live forever, so we should be sure to live fully now while we can. We should change now, repair those broken relationships, and return to our Creator to make life meaningful. There's no guarantee about tomorrow, but there is always a guarantee about now. Now is here, it is with us. Now stands before us, asking us, what do we want to do, with me? What do I want to do with myself? What am I doing? Think about the answer, but whatever it is, do it now. So what do the sages mean that life is like a passing shadow? And they make a striking observation that describes our modern times. They said that there are 3 types of shadows. To help you assimilate what I describe, imagine the burning sun, and that you seek shelter from that sun, and you want to take refuge in the shadow. So one type of shadow is called Ketzel Shel Oif, the shadow of a flying bird. The second is the Ketzel Shel Kaisel, the shadow of a wall. And then you have Ketzel Shel Dekel, the shadow of a fruit. And those of us who remember the old classic radio, the shadow knows, right? Am I right? The shadow knows. So there's 3 kinds of shadows. There's a shadow of a flying bird, there's a shadow of a wall, and the shadow of a fruit tree. So in describing these three types of shadows, the sages are vividly describing three kinds of lives that people choose to live. And from this we can deduce which type of lives offers the best protection to themselves and others equally. There are some, what I'm going to share with you, dear friends, is that we choose the kind of shadow that people can either have advantage of, can have the benefit of, or not. There are those who are compared to the shadow of a bird. What's the shadow of a bird? A shadow of a bird is typically in flight. When you choose to seek your shelter and you want to get behind the shadow of a flying bird, how much shadow can it do? You get close to the bird, you want to stand in its shadow, boom, in a second, it's gone. You're gone. How long can it provide you with a shadow? The bird will naturally move on. So even though for a moment the bird's shadow will block the sun, but it's always moving and offers no really steady relief. It gives no shade, no comfort, no protection, no happiness. It is basically a shade that has absolutely no use for anyone. You can't really protect yourself in the shadow of a bird. You can never predict where it will be next. So you can't get behind the bird to find shelter. Then you also have, time doesn't allow to go into such great details over here, but, New York Times columnist David Brooks wrote that there are two sets of virtues, the resume virtues and the eulogy virtues. The resume virtues are the skills you bring to the marketplace, the special capabilities you have acquired, trained for, worked towards, the ones that make your career path successful and make you good at whatever profession you have chosen. The eulogy virtues are the ones that will be talked about at your funeral, whether you were kind, brave, honest, or faithful, whether we were capable of deep love. They are the ones that we leave behind. That's the legacy that we leave behind. So again, what, in a sense, ourselves, what shadow are we providing? So if we provide a shadow of a bird, it means garnished. You get too close, gone, finish, gone. But then you also have the shadow provided by a wall. Well, we all know, depending on the day, the shadow will pass. From in the morning, it'll be on the other side of the wall, and in the afternoon, it'll be on the other side. But there is a point, midday, when the sun is right over the wall, there's no shadow at all. You find people, when they're younger, they're very idealistic, and when they get older, they also become idealistic. But midday, in the height of their life, when they're in the midlife, so to speak, and earning and ganze machers, they're nowhere to be seen. You can't rely on such persons. They have to be either younger or they have to be later in their lives. But when in the middle of their work, in the middle of their success, to find time to help somebody else, garnish, nothing, they're not around, don't bother me. I'm busy. That's the person who thinks they can provide a shadow over the wall. But then we come to the ultimate, the most beautiful of all shadows, and that is the shadow of a tree. The tree, doesn't matter what time, a tree with its enveloping branches and leaves, it doesn't matter what time of the day. It could be the morning, it could be the afternoon, it could be midday. But under that tree, you're going to get that shadow. You can have that sense of protection, of caring, of shelter from the rain, so to speak. My friends, this is what Yiska is all about, reminding us of where do we hold when our parents and grandparents and our loved ones look down at us and we say the Yiska, we're basically saying we recognize that the life, even though Passover is not a morbid time, but it is about reminding us of the joys of life, embracing, with a full heart, the meaning of life and the appreciation of freedom that we have. So during this week and on the last day of Passover, we all come to the synagogue or at home and we say the Yiska to stir our consciousness, to remind ourselves to make every moment count. It's not the morning time of our life. It's not the afternoon. It's not the midday. We're not like birds. We're not like wolves. But we can learn from the tree to don't be like a passing shadow of a bird in flight or the wall that comes and goes only at certain times, but to be like the tree that has consistency. We can rely on you in a consistent way. It provides a wonderful protection and shade at any time, day or night, so to speak, or at least morning, daytime, afternoon, providing us this ultimate connection. This is your host, thanking you for joining us today and giving us the opportunity. Please make every effort to enjoy the rest of the week and celebrate the last 2 days, the day we crossed over the Sea of Reeds, and the last day associated with Mashiach, and make a special meal in the afternoon. Come around with your friends and your family, have 4 cups of wine like we did at the beginning of the holiday, and some matzah, and let's prepare ourselves individually, internally, to welcome in a world of goodness and kindness with the coming of Mashiach. Wishing everybody Chag Sameach, and thank you all for joining us.
The views expressed on air are not necessarily those of WHPC, its management, or Nassau Community College. Responsible opposing